more, but two I can think of. One in 1995 when I actually ended up in The Hague, when I had just graduated from law school and came out as transgender and couldn't get a job to save my life. No job. Applied everywhere. My colleagues were getting jobs right and left. I graduated from Hastings, pretty good school. Most people were getting jobs, and I didn't. And I remember sitting in interviews and saying, I'm transgender. And actually hearing people say, what is transgender? And it's also like, it was important to me to be out. But I couldn't get a job to save my life. I, unlike others, was fortunate that someone had compassion and took me into their home, and I couch surfed for several months, more like 6 months, until I could get a job. Had that not been true, I could have easily seen myself hit in the street like many other transgender people end up hitting the street. And becoming homeless, and quite honestly, you know, I can't even imagine how challenging it is to be homeless and not use substances, honestly. That being said, I had another opportunity when I was 18 to become homeless, when my father was concerned about the gay disease and threw me out of his house. And for those of you that don't know, it was initially called the gay disease because it wasn't called AIDS or HIV, it was called the gay disease. And no one knew how it was transmitted, and he was concerned that I would give it to my little brother, who was about a year old at the time, and so he threw me out of the house. And I didn't know what to do, and I ended up actually joining this organization called the California Conservation Corps, because they had housing. And became, I don't know if you've heard of it, but stayed in that for 2 years and sort of got on my feet and moved on. But I could have, and I was in California at the time, I was actually in San Diego, but I moved up to San Francisco. I could have so easily become homeless. Because I couldn't, I was freaked out. I was scared, I was 18. And so many so much has been made about the fact that these youth on the hate street are migrants, meaning they're not from San Francisco. And let me just say that that could have been me, and they would have considered me a migrant, right? And I will say this, more often than not, that the kids that are on Hate Street are challenged, and I was challenged. I was extraordinarily challenged when I was 18. I was in a lot of pain because my father had thrown me out. And more often than not, that's true of all the queer kids who hit the streets in San Francisco and are homeless. And the ones that aren't got usually beat up by their parents or thrown out and are running away. And if they're not emotionally challenged, I don't know what is. And I think it is true that an incarceration model for these folks will only increase the chances that they will live a life of crime. And I don't think anyone in the district attorney's office will actually say otherwise. They will say, yes, the incarceration model has failed our youth. And I'm happy to report that the Chronicle thought so too, in another day and in another time. In 1994, when then Mayor Frank Jordan put Prop M on the ballot, the Chronicle editorialized against Prop M. Police already can tell people to move along if they are blocking the sidewalks. This is October 26, 1994. And that wild-eyed radical Herb King, does anybody remember him? He worked for the Chronicle as well. That wild-eyed radical Herb King, on August 12, 1994, wrote, as for his, meaning Mayor Jordan's, don't lie or sit on the sidewalk law, aimed at keeping the street people on their feet and moving briskly in all directions, it sounds like a bummer. Hand out milking stools to the panhandlers of your choice. And for those of you who lived in San Francisco at the time, Rob Morse ripped Prop M a new, and if you didn't read it, you should. And one of my favorite quotes was about, well, let's just be honest here. If you're going to apply this fairly, that means that you're going to go up to 24th Street in Noe Valley, hit all those people who are sitting outside the cafes, right?
That's right.
Because that's really the constitutional application of the law. A constitutional application of the law is not that you only do the homeless folks. And that's why, you know, I'll just say, last night I debated a gay neighborhood activist from the Hague who told me about the police orders that many have heard about in the papers. And I just want to note that, and I'm actually going to pass this out, one of the police orders is 5.03. And in that police order that they're asking, that the neighborhood organization that brings you sit lie is asking you to overturn, it says, it is the policy of the San Francisco Police Department that every person has the right to use the public streets and public places, so long as he/she does not engage in criminal activity. Factors such as the person's race, sex, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, gender presentation, age, dress, unusual, i.e. behavior, or disheveled or impoverished appearance do not alone justify even a brief detention, a request for identification, or an order to move on, in order to general complaints from residents, merchants, or others. Some would call that racial profiling, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's a reason they passed this police order, because in 1968, they passed a law that prohibited sitting or lying on the sidewalk. And in fact, my neighbor who lived in the Haight at the time, she was here for this Summer of Love, said to me that the Haight was much more hopping and much more exciting back then than it is now. And in fact, it's dull and tedious. That being said, they passed a sit-lie law targeting the hippies. And in fact, and this is why this police order is so important, they ended up targeting gay men instead. And many of you may have heard, and I actually put it in my initial resolution, that in fact they arrested and ultimately only charged 14 gay men for hanging outside of a gay bar. And for those of you who actually watched Harvey Milk, you'll notice that there were plenty of gay men sitting on the street in the Castro. Did you all watch Harvey Milk? I did. Did you see the Cleve Jones sitting on the sidewalk? I did. And yes, they were arrested, and Harvey Milk, who I will, for obvious reasons, not cite because I don't think we should always do what Harvey Milk did, but I do think it's notable that the gay community fought against police brutality because of the sit-lie law, and it was ultimately overturned a year after his death. To that police order, I would just say, if you want this repealed, then what you're asking for is racial profiling, right? And disheveled, they can't say homeless, but apparently, if you look poor, you can't be discriminated. Well, I actually believe that's right. So the other general order that they want you to demonize, and I'm going to pass that out as well, is 6.11. How many of you have been arrested with the hotel workers? Okay, if you've been with the hotel workers, you know that when you sit down in the lobby, the hotel has to file a complaint. They would love it if they didn't have to. I can tell you, I had, how many times, they would love to not have to file it because they don't like having to arrest people, right? And then, it's true, So a citizen's complaint must be filed. But I was talking to Mike Casey about this. For those of you that don't know Mike Casey, he's the president of the San Francisco Labor Council and the president of Local 2. What he said to me, and I think this is interesting, was a bunch of folks had been picketing for many, many hours, and they were really tired, about 50 of them. So they sat down on the sidewalk. They sat down on the sidewalk. Did they be arrested? Yes.
Yes.
And I'll just say this, for those of you that say, oh, it's just, we're not actually going to arrest people. Well, a quarter of the population of the county jail is, in fact, homeless. And 30 days incarceration is part of this legislation. If it's not, if it wasn't about putting people in jail, then why do they have 30 days in jail as part of it? I changed my resolution